Welcome to Innovating with Scott Amyx. I'm your host, Scott, and today I'm joined by Denise Brody, who is the Chief Operating Officer at WorkForce Software. Welcome, Denise.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me today.
All right, so I want to actually go back several years back, much earlier in your career when you were with a startup called Top Tier that was at some point then acquired by SAP. If you could just kind of give us a little bit of kind of that background, that would be terrific and helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very fortunate to come into tech in '96 and had a chance to start my career in consulting. And I had a friend who went to California, relocated from the East Coast, come into Top Tier. And at this time, believe it or not, Top Tier was responsible for, a portal solution, which if you go into Yahoo, Google, you see all these portals that are part of our daily lives today. But literally in 2000, it was not a popular concept. And I had the pleasure to work for Shai Agassi and the entire, I would say, very hard-driven entrepreneurs. The company was, based in California, but half of it was in Israel, and then the other half in California. And after being there for a few months, I came in as a product manager and product management. And in a few months, literally, we got announced that we're getting acquired by SAP. SAP had just missed the internet, and they had tons of content that would get served and all of the different aspects, whether it be sales and distribution or supply chain, but they wanted a way to aggregate it onto a portal-like solution. So it's very similar if you're reading a newspaper. If you're reading the newspaper, you want everything organized into different sections, and that's what we did at Top Tier. And really, I think Hasso really came in and bought Top Tier because of Shai Agassi. I mean, he was just such an amazing innovator to learn from and to be part of the growth strategy.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I mean, the fact that you have that span of, perspective from the early days of the creation of some of the infrastructure, what we call internet today, to, eventually, of course, cloud and some of the work that you've done. It's intriguing in terms of data aggregation and portal sites. I know back then widgets were very big, and
Mm.
we kind of take everything for granted these days. But talk to us about how your role at SAP changed from that to eventually becoming this global COO of industry cloud, which again speaks to kind of tectonic shifts in terms of the industry and technology infrastructure.
Yeah, coming to SAP was probably one of the most rewarding phases in my career, and in every aspect. I mean, in the 15 years, being able to work in so many different areas and jump around. So, coming into from Top Tier over to SAP, I literally looked at my role and I said, doing product marketing, product management, there was one of me, there's 13 people in the area around the portal and content. And I literally turned to my boss at that time and I said, I would love the opportunity to go do business development or partners or something more on the go-to-market side, because at SAP, product marketing and product management was very stuck in between development and sales. And it was a little bit like neither here nor there. So I got that opportunity as part of the transition. And the first year I was spending it with a partner team, doing some business development with them. And then the major shift was there was this great guy who, Ranjan Das, who came to me, and he was starting this whole initiative on cross applications and eventually also leading the NetWeaver technology platform. And they wanted somebody that had a little bit more of a technical background. And I didn't even mention when I started my career in consulting, I spent 2 years programming and also deploying ERP, including SAP packages. So I kind of knew the little bit of the guts around the software itself. And I jumped on the opportunity, and literally that led into launching new products in 5 years to getting transitioned to running operations for fast growth markets, and then getting tapped by the chief strategy officer to take the competitive and market intelligence team out of the marketing organization, coming in and actually putting it into the board area. And at this time, Bill McDermott was doing quite a bit of, acquisition. So we were involved in
Mm.
every cloud potential acquisition to build out the area. And then that eventually led into running solution marketing, value engineering, and a few other areas, which kind of rounds out my skill. And in my last year and a half, I was tapped to be the COO for, Industry Cloud, which was about a $10 billion license as well as service area. And the goal was really to take the 3,000 products, and it was a mix. Some things were in the cloud and some things were not. And then really build the entire go-to-market and industry areas to move into the cloud. And it was a lot of fun. And I didn't even mention, there were multiple opportunities in between that. I built the CFO Buying Center, which was one of the other businesses that literally started with acquiring a company for 15 million to then growing it to 150 million. So there were lots of areas in between. And I think that, the ability to touch so many different areas just gave me such a great opportunity to get mentored, the sponsorship, and build teams that gave me the confidence to really take the risk every single time at SAP. So that's a little bit around the journey for the 15 years at SAP.
Well, it's terrific in terms of clearly you stood out as a superstar, and a lot of that was, to your point, it's multidisciplinary, multifunction, and that rotation, that exposure, and the opportunities to really usher in new change. Really, I mean, taking all those different various apps and then bring it into the cloud in a very systematic way, on a scalable way. I mean, that takes quite a orchestration of people and services and resources to make that happen. So you have a really well kind of a blend of product engineering, sales, marketing, operational experience, which then leads to what you're doing today. You're chief operating officer at WorkForce, and you have been installed, I believe, after private equity capital injection. Tell us about your transition from SAP to WorkForce and what that journey has been like so far.
Yeah, and now I've been at WorkForce for the last 4.5 years. And I came in initially as the CMO. So I really wanted to change out of my operator hat from the SAP departure and come in and have a wider impact and really being able to touch everything, because in marketing, you're truly in the guts of everything, whether it be branding, whether it be demand gen, whether it's rolling out the core company values, right, or enablement. So I came in and helped the company to scale the first year. By the way, we grew the company from the starting point of 61 million to over 100 million today. Our initial investor is, Insight Partners, which is based out in New York. And through this past summer, we went and we got an incremental investor, which is the private equity arm of Evergreen. Or a the actual arm of Elliott, which is Evergreen. And that has really given us enough, cash infusion to re-platform our entire technology base, as well as extend our go-to-market. When I first came, we started with about, focus in 40 countries. Today, we're over 65 countries. And really the opportunity to come in and take 600 people, all we do is focus on workforce management. And you look at that and you go, what is workforce management, right? I always joke a little bit about it. We bring the sexy back into timesheets. So it seems so simple. In timesheets, you punch in and you punch out. So if you're a restaurant worker or you're in retail or you're in a bank, it sounds so simple. But just look at this. In the US, there's over 400 regulations that are just focused on time itself and labor. So if you were to have, let's say you work at Walmart and you're in, San Francisco, you end up paying the associate $15. You need to send them to Palo Alto, it's $16. So either a timekeeper or payroll person is manually going to make that change, or our system is going to automate all of the information that needs to flow from, an HR system to a payroll system. So without that, you cannot get the calculation for those paychecks at the end of whether it be biweekly or monthly basis.
That's great. And I know at the onset of this interview, we were just talking about the effects of the current COVID pandemic. Again, this is recorded as of end of April. In terms of how that is changing your business, if you kind of go into that, because many of your clients tend to have employees or workers that are offline. Um, so if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and definitely I'll share from a marketing perspective. In this environment, it does not really pay to market for net new customers. If they need the software, they'll come to you as part of the brand and part of things that you've launched as the content strategy. So immediately within the first week of COVID, we launched a resource center. And for us, what is great is in that resource center, you can go out and look at our business continuality plan. You can look at regulations like family leave that has changed during this process. So you can actually come in and look at anything that would impact you as an employer or potentially impact the employee base. One of the biggest retailers that's doing really well during the COVID, they actually contacted us to help them roll out 10 additional centers in order to support COVID. They use some of the content in our resource center. Of course, they're using our software, but that was a great orchestration to help one of our existing customers come in and extend their reach to the employees, as well as making sure that that infrastructure is in place. And I think that when you see key industries that need the support where the workers are still essential, right? And state and local right now, people are still having to service hospitals. They're still having to service the jails. I mean, and we support many of the state and local governments in order to have the essential workers come in and capture their time effectively during this process.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point. Is that especially in this time of lockdown, we have these critical, essential workers that are, really providing absolutely necessary services at all levels of the government and private sectors, and it's important that they get compensated properly for their time. So
Yes.
the work that you're doing is super critical for really keeping America and the rest of the world going moving
Yeah.
forward. Talk to us about some of your more kind of pressing priorities right now that you can share publicly.
Yeah, and look, I think, you mentioned, with COVID as well, there's so many unknowns. We just don't know. We don't know where we're going to be in the next 3 months. We don't know where we're going to be in the next 6 months. At Workforce, we're very fortunate. We went through a very nice growth phase in the last 4.5 years. And our number one priority, especially as an entire senior leadership team, is to keep all of our employees together during this process. There's many things that we have instituted just so that we clearly communicate the together messaging, right? In February, we had already made the decision, for example, to pay out all employee bonuses. And in order to do that during the COVID time, all VPs and up decided to delay their own bonuses so that employees can get paid. So our biggest priority is to keep the growth trajectory of the company and keep all of our 600 employees together as part of that process. That is number one. And then I think that, as you have happy employees that are going to be productive during this time, the second part is really to create, the best customer experience that we can have during this time as well. We're fortunate to be in the cloud. We have been able to assist quite a few of our customers because not all of our customers have been able to work remotely. So they've been able to supplement some of our managed services as well as some of our own resources to help support, their own environment, which is key. So I would say those are the big two priorities for us.
Okay, terrific. Well, I really applaud the management team's commitment to the workforce, and of course, there are a lot of uncertainties that's coming up with the severe recession, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, and certainly the unemployment rising. That will have some material effect for you guys as some of those line workers and people out on the field get affected in terms of displacement. Um, let's talk a little bit further. I mean, recession, expansion, all of these are cycles that we will eventually get through. And if anything, we've shown that there's really resiliency So I'm not overly concerned in terms of whether we're going to make it out of it. So if you think about kind of the let's say 10 years out, where is workforce going? What is the future horizon in terms of where you guys want to go?
Yeah, for us, it's definitely a consistent growth strategy, right? With any company, of course, private equity owned, there's really only three natural spots, right? One, you're either going to get some incremental investments in another private equity or venture fund. Two, you're part of a strategic sell, or three, you go IPO. And what we look at is really for us, if we continue on our growth trajectory and we're able to have the opportunity to be a standalone company, which we have maintained really for the last 4.5 years since we've been part of, the investments, and we continue to innovate, and that's hopefully our trajectory as part of this, is to really look at to have a profitable and sustainable growth.
All right, great, terrific. Thanks for sharing that. Now, one of the things that you do is you also lead an initiative called the Workforce Women's Network within your organization. Tell us what that is and why is that important to you?
Yeah, I think that, for us, what really gave me the aha moment, I remember reaching out to the CHRO, who I'm in a very tight partnership with to have the Women's Network at Workforce. And I remember pinging Leslie Ternacki, our CHRO, and said, by the way, how many women do we have in our organization? And this is only a year and a half ago, as I was coming back from one of our user groups, and it was like 46%. And I said, how many of them are in management? And then it was like, oh, 16%. And I said, wow, what a big gap between the number of women versus the number of folks in management. And I started to ask around, was this a desire, or was it a lack of coaching, mentoring, maybe, combining that with sponsorship in between? And so as part of the due diligence, we really decided that it was critical for our organization. We were founded, now it's been 20 years, but the first 16 years it was founder led. And then, of course, private equity and the new management team came in. And we looked at this opportunity, or this as an opportunity to launch the Women's Network, come in and not only make this accessible to every single person in the company, but every 6 weeks we invite guest speakers, we sponsor, learning programs for the women, as well as activities during this process. And the nominations can come from anywhere in the business. So what we look at is we really facilitate a solid community where network coaching, mentoring, and then sponsorship happens, so that if the women have a desire to move into various positions, whether it be lateral management, leadership, they have all of the opportunities to do that. It's critical. It's heavily sponsored by our CEO, Mike Marini, and it's something that we're very proud of here at Workforce.
It's terrific to hear of that commitment to having more diversity inclusion. It's interesting because there are studies that show that when management are asked in terms of why are there not enough women at the board level as well as senior executive level, and their response tends to be, well, they're just not enough of a deep pool of women leaders. But other studies actually show that it actually starts much earlier as staff level. And when women don't get selected to the next tier, at the time that management is looking at the pool of, let's say, managers or senior managers, there just aren't enough women to promote. So by the time you get to director level, VP level, again, the same thing happens. But that effect actually starts much earlier. So really the development and the opportunities given at the early aspects of the career is super critical. And certainly just like what we talked about at the beginning, your ability, the opportunities that you were given, but also, you pursued, allow for you to cross-pollinate and get into different roles and move upward in terms of career path. So that's terrific. Our last question we always ask is if you could share a product or project failure and lessons learned that you can share with others.
Yeah, there's been so many, but I will tell you that, in many of the acquisitions and new products that I worked on at SAP, when we were building out the CFO buying center, for example, the first acquisition that came in, as I mentioned, did 15, and it was rock solid. Went to 50, and then it went to 150 the following year, and then we started to add additional acquisitions as part of that. But then, our team had the America's responsibility to bring in business objects as part of the acquisition. And it was a really tough acquisition, right? Because one, the size and the fact that at that point in time, SAP had not done tons of large acquisitions, it made it a really tough one in between. So, for us, it was not only the leadership synergies, but being able to take the entire go-to-market. And I remember during the last year when that acquisition came in, then all of the analytics got pulled into different portions of the region. So again, I think that you can look at failure and you can say, how do I pick myself and my team up and restart and keep taking the calculated risk, right? That was a big one as part of my career, but it wasn't what stopped me afterwards. I just looked at that as, wow, that's a great lesson. And the next time we're looking at an acquisition that big, there's more things that need to happen on the go-to-market front. And granted, we can't control every direct sales. We can't control, all the folks in that large of an organization. But I really kind of looked at that and said, what can I do as a leader to minimize that moving forward? So that's always in the back of my mind when I think of some of the lessons and failures from the past.
What a valuable experience. Well, thank you for sharing that. And today I've been joined by Denise Brody, who is the Chief Operating Officer at WorkForce Software. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks, Scott.